The cold tile of the locker room pressed against Jason's back as he leaned into it, sweat drying unevenly across his skin. The game had pushed him harder than expected, and now his shoulder throbbed with a dull, familiar ache. He pressed 2, fingers into the muscle, but it only flared in protest. A soft buzz from his phone lit the screen. Just Dylan liking a meme he'd sent hours ago. No message, no, how are you feeling? Just another silence pretending to be attention. He sighed and tossed the phone onto the bench. Across the room, Luka pulled off his jersey with the ease of someone who didn't know how many eyes followed him. He wasn't the loudest guy on the team, but his presence always seemed heavier than the rest, like a flame that didn't flicker, just burned steadily. "You're rubbing that same spot again," Luka said, tossing his jersey into his bag. "Let me guess, rotator cuff?" Jason blinked, surprised. "Probably, I don't know. It's tight." "Come here." Luka motioned toward the padded bench near the treatment table. "I'll fix it." Jason hesitated. They weren't strangers, but they weren't exactly close either. Still, something about Luka's voice made it easy to obey without thinking too hard. He sat, shirtless, feeling exposed in a way that wasn't entirely physical. Luka's hands were warm, sure, and when they touched his shoulder, it was like they already knew what they were doing. There was no fumbling, no uncertainty, just a smooth, purposeful pressure that sent tingles down Jason's spine. "Damn," he murmured. "You missed your calling." Luka chuckled softly behind him. "You'd be surprised what I'm good at." Jason meant to laugh it off, but something in the way Luka said it curled around his spine like smoke. He closed his eyes as thumbs dug gently into the muscle, working it loose. The pain gave way to something looser, and then something warmer. Jason told himself it was just physical relief, that's all. But then Luka's hand slid a little lower, not quite inappropriate, not yet, but enough to make Jason hyper-aware of every breath he took. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came. Only the hum of the overhead light, the rustle of Luka shifting behind him. "You all right?" Luka asked, voice quieter now, almost right at his ear. Jason nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just tired." Luka's hands paused. "You don't have to act okay, you know. Not with me." Jason swallowed. "It's not that. I'm just... Dylan's been kind of distant lately. Maybe I've been distant too." There it was, spoken aloud. A half-truth that hung in the air like a trembling thread. He hadn't planned to say that. Hadn't even realized how much it ached until he did. "Relationships hit walls sometimes," Luka said. "Sometimes they break them, sometimes they don't." Jason felt the shift in Luka's tone. A step closer, metaphorically and literally. His hands rested now, not needing, just staying there, warm, present, grounding. "You ever have something that made you feel seen?" Luka asked. "Even just for a minute?" Jason's throat tightened. "Yeah," he said softly. "Once." He didn't say it was a long time ago. He didn't have to. Luka leaned forward a fraction, and Jason could feel his breath on the back of his neck now. Everything in him screamed that he should move, should stand, should laugh it off, but he didn't. Instead, he whispered, "Maybe I should go." Luka pulled back slightly but didn't let go of his shoulder. "You can, but you don't want to." Jason stood, breaking the contact like a thread snapping. He faced away as he reached for his shirt, pretending he didn't see the way Luka's eyes followed him. "Thanks for the help," he muttered, already halfway out the door. "Any time," Luka said behind him, like a promise or a challenge. Outside, the night air hit him like a slap. He didn't go home right away. He walked circles around the parking lot, phone in hand, screen dark. He thought about Dylan's silence, thought about Luka's touch, thought about how fast something innocent can shift when someone sees you, not as who you're supposed to be, but as who you are in the moments when nobody else is watching. When he did get home, Dylan was already asleep, face buried in the pillow, back turned toward the door. Jason stood there a long time, shirt still clutched in his hand, the bruise on his shoulder somehow less painful now. He lay down quietly beside Dylan and stared at the ceiling. His body remembered every place Luca's fingers had pressed, and, in the silence between them, Jason realized, tonight, it wasn't just soreness that had been worked loose. Jason winced as his cleats touched the turf. His thigh had locked up again halfway through drills, and he could barely stretch without that dull twist of pain flaring through his leg. Coach waved him off the field with a clipboard gesture, no questions asked. "Get some ice on it," he said. "You're no good to me limping." He made his way into the treatment room, alone at first, but the door creaked a few seconds later. Luca stepped in, holding a towel and one of the gel packs from the freezer. "Figured you'd end up in here," Luca said, casually tossing the towel over Jason's leg. "Let me help." Jason opened his mouth to protest, but Luca was already kneeling beside him, careful fingers placing the ice pack onto the swollen muscle. The cold bit hard, but what unsettled Jason more was how natural this was starting to feel. Luca kneeling close, hands brushing bare skin like it meant nothing and everything at once. "You always volunteer to babysit broken teammates?" Jason asked, trying to keep it light. "Only the ones who get quiet when they're hurting," Luca said without looking up. His voice wasn't teasing. It was too knowing. Jason leaned back, arms behind him. The room was silent except for the buzz of the fridge and the occasional shift of fabric. Luca's hands began to move again, not just placing the ice, but massaging the area above it, slowly, deliberately. "Thought this was just an ice pack," Jason muttered. "You know me by now," Luca said, his voice low. "I don't stop where things start." Jason closed his eyes for a moment, battling the heat creeping into his chest. "You shouldn't say things like that." Luca didn't answer immediately. His hand paused at the edge of the towel, his thumb brushing dangerously close to Jason's inner thigh. "And yet I do." It should have ended there. Jason should have stood up, thrown the towel aside, and walked out. But instead, his breath hitched. The muscles in his leg flexed, not from pain, but anticipation. When Luca finally looked up, their eyes met for the first time that day. Jason shifted forward. Just a little. Just enough. "You know I'm with someone," he whispered, as if saying it aloud gave him a shield he could hide behind. Luca reached for his wrist gently, grounding him. "Then tell me to stop." Jason didn't move. Luca rose, slow and deliberate, and Jason didn't realize. He'd been holding his breath until their mouths touched. It wasn't desperate at first, just curious, careful. Luca tasted like heat and risk, and Jason leaned into it, letting the moment unfold like a secret too long held. The kiss deepened, fast, almost chaotic. Their hands moved on instinct, each tug and touch blurring the line between caution and surrender. Jason felt himself unraveling, months of neglect, buried resentment, loneliness clawing out from beneath his ribs, all being rewritten in the way Luca held him like he mattered. They didn't undress. That somehow felt like a step too far. But fingers snuck beneath waistbands, breaths turned into shallow gasps, and skin pressed into skin with wordless urgency. The table creaked beneath them, and Jason's hand found Luca's back, not to hold him back, but to pull him closer. It ended as abruptly as it had begun, sweat cooling fast, heart still racing. Luca wiped his hands on the towel and said nothing for a moment. Then, "We don't have to talk about it." Jason stared at the ceiling. His body was still catching up to what had just happened. "But we will, won't we?" Luca looked over. "Only if you want to." Jason pulled up his shorts and stood, unsteady. His leg still ached, but the pain felt distant now, drowned beneath something heavier, guilt, maybe, or longing. "I need to go," Jason said. Luca didn't follow, just nodded once and turned away. Jason walked out into the hallway, blinking. at the brightness. The real world hit him like a bucket of water. He drove home in silence, windows down, the wind not cooling anything. Dylan was setting out dinner when he arrived. Pasta with too much garlic, the way Jason liked it. He smiled when Jason walked in. "Hey, babe," Dylan said. "Rough day?" Jason stepped forward and kissed him. It was soft, careful, too careful. Dylan didn't notice. "Yeah," Jason said, "just sore." As they sat to eat, Jason's mind kept drifting, back to the room, to the bench, to Luca's, hand on his thigh. He hated that it didn't feel like a mistake. He hated that it felt like something he'd been waiting for. Across the table, Dylan talked about weekend plans. Jason nodded at all the right moments, but tasted nothing. The full guilt hadn't arrived yet, only the silence. Jason lay awake, listening to the soft rhythm of Dylan's breathing beside him. The room was dark, but the light from the hallway spilled just enough to outline the curve of Dylan's shoulder, the gentle rise and fall of his back. It should have been comforting, familiar even. But Jason felt miles away from the man lying next to him. His body was here, but the weight in his chest told a different story. He hadn't heard from Luca since that day in the training room. No texts, no stolen glances across the field, just an aching silence between them that Jason didn't know how to interpret. Maybe that was better. Maybe silence made it easier to pretend it hadn't happened. But it had. And the worst part wasn't the act. It was how right it had felt in the moment. Jason turned onto his back, staring at the ceiling like it might offer clarity. He thought about Dylan, about the 3 years they'd built together, the routines, the shared playlists, the way Dylan always remembered to restock Jason's favorite granola bars even when they weren't speaking. He thought about the love that once burned wild and now flickered gently, quietly. He also thought about the look in Luca's eyes, that unflinching, honest hunger, the way he didn't ask for permission but waited for Jason to decide, the way his touch had said, "I see you," not just as a teammate or someone's boyfriend, but as a man who had been silently falling apart under the weight of what he couldn't admit. The guilt settled heavy in his stomach. He rose quietly, careful not to wake Dylan, and slipped into the hallway. The tile was cold under his feet. His phone buzzed softly from the counter. One message from Luca, hours old. "You don't owe me anything, but I won't pretend that didn't mean something." Jason read it 3 times before locking the screen again. He didn't reply. Dichaki. Next day at practice, the sun was brutal, baking the field until the air shimmered. Luca jogged beside him, silent, purposeful. When they paused for water, Luca finally spoke, low enough so no one else could hear. "You good?" Jason nodded. "I think so." Luca's brow lifted. "That's not a yes." Jason took a long sip from his bottle. "I'm trying to figure out who I'm supposed to be, that's all." Luca looked at him, and for a moment, something unspoken passed between them. Acknowledgement, maybe, or resignation. "You don't have to decide today," Luca said, "but don't lie to yourself for someone else's comfort." Jason didn't respond. He watched Luca walk away, muscles taut, sweat clinging to his shirt. It would be so easy to follow, but easy didn't always mean right. That evening, Jason sat across from Dylan again. Dinner was quiet, but not in the way it used to be. Dylan looked up midway through the meal, eyes soft. "I've been distracted lately," he said. "Work's been overwhelming, but that's no excuse." Jason swallowed hard. "I miss you," Dylan added, "and I know I've been distant. But I want us to fix this. If there's something you're not telling me, I'd rather know. We can work through it." Jason looked at him, heart pounding. The door was open. He could confess. He could tell the truth and let the pieces fall where they may. But the words stayed lodged in his throat. "I miss you too," he said instead. Dylan smiled, relieved, reached across the table and touched his hand. Later that night, as Dylan fell asleep beside him again, Jason lay motionless. The window was cracked open, letting in the soft whisper of wind through the trees. He whispered Luca's name once, just once, like a ghost he wasn't ready to exorcise. He knew the lie wouldn't last forever. But for tonight, it wrapped around him like a blanket, thin, fragile, just warm enough to fall asleep under.